Hello, right, well, it's the next epic sea voyage on the little Fletcher arrowflash. I'm going to a very beautiful bay on the Isle of Wight, on the east coast of the Isle of Wight, and you can see it behind me here, and you can see the sea is fairly flat and it's very, very sunny. So there it is, just there, right out on the point there. Well, I mean, the most important thing about making a sea voyage like this, of course, is planning. Some would say the arrowflash is just too small to take a trip like this, but I used to drive the rescue boats here down on Hayling, and I've come back in boats a little bit bigger but in furious seas, so it's all about confidence really. The boat will certainly take it, as long as you haven't got wooden floorboards, of course. I've got plastic floorboards on this one. And so, planning, what do we look at? Well, we look at the internet, and there's the Met Office there. And that gives us a fairly accurate schedule of the day, and the main thing is that we've got fairly light winds from the southwest, west-southwest, which means we're sheltered a little bit by the Isle of Wight. We get up to 13 knots at about 1600 this afternoon, 13 miles an hour. That's about as much as you want really for a little boat like this, because with the wind, with the sea breeze, that will probably get up to 25 knots at times and chop up the sea. The other thing is obviously get weather forecasts off the TV, and also work out the tides. It's a neap tide today, which means that we're not going to get massive runs of tide. Now I'm going to try and go out, well, the tide's going to be sort of at slack water when I go out, which would minimise the wind against tide effect, which is the worst effect you can get for a little boat like this, because it becomes almost unnavigable. But so I'm going to try and go out on the slack tide and then come back on the high tide. But as I said, it's a neap, it's a small neap, so there's not going to be big rises in tides. So with the tide at 6 o'clock in the evening, so it's not going to be a massive problem for me. The other thing, of course, is planning from the point of view of charts. Here I should have my protractor and everything, but that's all on the big boat at the moment. But I basically measure the track that I'm taking, which will be out to the West Pole, across the Bembridge Ledge, just out to the Princess, and then into Whitecliff Bay. If I measure that all out, that's about 8 nautical miles. I'm going to take a note of all the buoys as I go, and I shall let you know as I come across them. And the other thing, of course, is before you set out, ring someone so they can initiate overdue action if you don't turn up soon after you say. Well, there's the arrowflash, nicely put in the water for me. As I said, this journey is going to be about 8 miles. So I thought it worked out on the last voyage that it was about a litre a mile, so about 16 litres. So I'm going to go over there and meet some friends who've got a much larger boat over at the Isle of Wight, and have a bit of water skiing and then come back. So with 55 litres on board, that should be okay for the trip over there, and a bit of water skiing, a bit of lunch, and on the way back. So we'll see how it goes. Before I get started, one of the things that I do is I have 2 tanks in the back with 2 complete fuel lines, so whenever I want to switch between tanks, it's quite easy, done at the fuel line end. Also, that kind of insulates you from any fuel line issues, cracks in the fuel line or anything like that. So if you start having problems with the running of the engine, you just swap to the other fuel line. Yeah, being a bit of an old 2-stroke, they are a bit pernickety to start, so what I do is I turn it over and then push the choke after about 10 seconds and then grab the throttle so as not to flood it. Now that took me years to learn, so that's a good little tip for you Fletcher owners. Right, we're just leaving, I'm just leaving the marina at this time on hailing. The first thing I do is take a note of the time, because as I mentioned in an earlier video, each tank is about 100 minutes on sort of flat water, so you can sort of work it out from there. And what I take with me is just things like life jackets, extra change of clothes, wetsuits, a little bit of food, a little bit of water, all that sort of stuff. I don't actually carry flares on board because with my kids, flares and 55 litres of fuel doesn't go together. So I do have a marine radio on board though, and of course my GPS. What I'm going to do is, once I get a little bit more out of the harbour here, I'm going to teach you something a little bit about trimming. Because the Fletcher is very, very narrow and has very large engines, which is what the public wanted, unfortunately you do end up with a lot of twist. But there is a way out of that. People try to cure it with tabs and weight and stuff like that, but it's purely down to the up and down trim of the motor, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I get a bit faster. So, trim. You'll find, as you're doing about 5 knots, as we are coming out of the harbour here, you'll get a lot of bow steer. Now this is where the nose of the boat will get knocked by a wave and then go off in that direction, then knocked by a wave and go off in that direction. So we're basically displacing at the moment, and we have bow steer. You'll find yourself wrestling backwards and forwards. You get this right up to about 28 foot, 30 foot motorboat, so don't think you're going to get out of it. Now once I start coming up a little in speed like that, you'll start to get a lot of pull to the left or the right of the steering wheel, clockwise or anti-clockwise. Now this is to do with the propeller not being exactly parallel to the surface of the water. Mercury talk a lot about this, so I've got a lot of pull now trying to pull me to the starboard side. So by just trimming the engine up like that, all gets neutralised. It's now not pulling at all. Of course it's irritating because you don't really want the nose up when you're just displacing like this, so you have to find a good compromise. Now that's all gone now, and I'm starting to get pulled to the other side by trimming up. When you want to accelerate hard, of course you want to trim very well in. If you've got big seas, you want to trim very well down, and of course you'll get pull. But when you accelerate, you'll get quite good at just trimming up as you accelerate to stop the cant to the starboard side. Or is it starboard? Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, actually sometimes it's the port side. And don't forget, wind has a massive effect as well. If you've got a crosswind, you'll find that you're canting. If you've got crosswind from the starboard side, you'll find that you're canting to the starboard side as well. So I'm just starting to leave Hailing Bay here. As I said, just a word on trim again. You'll see that I'm having to hold the left hand down on the boat because the boat wants to turn to the right. So if I now trim up, that's now completely gone. It's now completely neutral. So it's now completely neutral. So be careful. People tell you to get trims, tell you to try and adjust the trim tab at the back. It's purely the up and down trim of the motor. Obviously you can make this smaller by actually lifting or moving the engine at the back slightly to the right. And you'll notice on Fletchers that they have been put about to the starboard about 1.5 inches, and that helps a little bit, but it'll never completely cure it. Okay, coming out of the Hailing Bay, this is where we're going to lift the biggest seas. Even at slack tide, you're going to get a crossing of the tide from the Solent, a crossing of the tide from Chichester. So I'm just passing Bar Beacon, and I'm making my way here to West Pole before turning onto a heading to go across the Tanker Channel and to the Bembridge Ledge Cardinal. and you'll see that my lovely speedo is working again, which is down to a bit of a airlock, I think. When you've got some dono in front of you making a big wave like this, it's just best to get in his wake like this where it's flat, and I'm just following him out now just to make use of the fact that he's flattening the water, use some of his energy rather than mine. Okay, just passing the East Neal Cardinals, which I showed you on the map, on the charts. There's a wreck down there, so you get a lot of fishing going on by then. I've got about just under 3 miles to run now to the Bembridge Ledge, so it's been a wonderful crossing. I'm just going to start crossing the tanker channel now, so I just have to keep my eye out for any tankers coming across. It's really weird, they descend on you quite quickly. Some of the cruise liners do about 22 knots at this stage. Just a word about trim again. It's a delicate balancing act. Sometimes you have to put up with a little bit of clockwise pull on the steering wheel, because what you don't want is a constant porpoising where the nose is going up and down, up and down. It's really tedious. You'll hit a wave and it'll take several bounces to calm down. Always having, if you can keep the engine trimmed in or down, that will obviously minimise porpoising. Some boats are really bad for it. The arrowflash is actually really good because we're sat well forward of the engine, so we actually balance it out. I think it's one of their best boats, to be honest. Because you have to remember this costs 5,000 quid, and really I'm getting a very stable ride for it. So we're just passing through the tanker channel now, and I don't want to hang around in the tanker channel if I can, so I've managed to get her up to 35 miles an hour, which is fabulous on a run like this. And there, just in the distance, you can see the Whitecliffs starting to loom of the Whitecliff Bay. Once I get into the lee of the island, I'll get really flat water, and I should be able to open up to about 45 miles an hour. Okay, just passing the Bembridge Ledge here, which I marked out on the map. We're on our way to Whitecliff now. That's done it in 25 minutes, which is the fastest I've ever done. Now, I should have flat water very soon. Now, I'm going to come out to the Princess over here, because being such a low tide, it's quite easy to cut the edge and go aground, so I'm just going to come out here. One thing I note for lobster pots, these guys are quite indiscriminate where they put lobster pots. You have to keep an eye out for them, because I've stopped dead on one of those before, and if that happens to you at night, it's really tedious. So keep a good eye out for those, and well, here we are. I'm going to start turning in a minute, and the next shot I should be doing about 45 miles an hour.
Okay, I actually, after that shot of the Speedo, I actually got it up to 50 by trimming it right out with the nose right up in the air. But now I'm just joining my friends here for lunch, and then we'll be doing a little bit of water skiing. Maybe I'll get a shot of that later on. I'm going to have to just concentrate a little bit here just to get myself tied up and anchored all right. And there it is, moored up. Good old arrowflash, moored up behind the fair line.
We arrived, it was okay yesterday. This time was...
Hello! And here we are on board, about to have lunch. Right, well, we've had a very nice lunch. We didn't do any water skiing actually, funny enough. All a bit tired and emotional, and the wind's come up. So I've got a good sort of 20 knots of wind coming from the south here now. So a little trick I'm going to do here is my friends are going back part the way, so I'm going to follow in their wake so that I'm not getting thrashed about too much, and then just peel off and carry on off to hailing. So this is a little tip if you've got big seas, is just get in behind a large boat just to flatten out the waves for you. The wind came up round to the south, and I've now got a tide coming from the west, and it's quite hectic. So I'm going to have quite a hectic trip on the way back. I'd say we're about 20 knots of wind coming from the south, which wasn't forecast, but unfortunately you always have to allow for that. So I'm going to do part of the trip like this. As always, when you're doing something a little bit dodgy like this, always keep your kill cord attached to your belt or around your leg just in case you come out. Because I am not fully trimmed properly at the moment, so it would come round for me. Okay, so they're heading round to Cows. I'm now going to branch off and head over to hailing now, which is on a slightly different steering. So I'm going to say goodbye to them, and let's see what it's like crossing the Tanker Channel. Right, I'm in the centre of the Tanker Channel now. It's not too bad, I have to say. I've got the worst state of all tides, unfortunately, with the tide coming in from the left, from the port side, and the wind coming from behind me, so it's almost wind against tide. What unfortunately is boring is I've got the pilot vessel coming in, who kicks up an almighty amount of chop. So I'll probably have to slow right down in the middle of the Solent here. Well, yes, as I predicted, there was an almighty amount of wake off that pilot boat. I don't know how they managed to design it so badly it throws up so much wake. But anyway, quite simple, just came down to about, just on the plane, 11 knots, and transversed over them just at 45 degrees. So take them sideways, not straight on, otherwise you're very likely to bury the nose and cover yourself in water, and you run the risk of swamping the engine. So just take them side on at 45 degrees. I've got 4 minutes to run till West Pole, which is the entrance of hailing. I'm just passing East Eel now, which is what I showed you on the map. And yeah, luckily it's nice and sunny, but we are getting some very large waves out here. So much so I'm probably going to have to start driving around them. So unfortunately I've ended up with probably one of the worst sea states you can get, which is wind against tide. So the tide is boring out of Chichester Harbour now, and I've got a southerly wind blowing across it, which is causing quite big crests. It's quite nice, it's quite comfortable because I've got the wind behind me from the point of view of spray going over me, but I'm starting to have to drive around the waves now, so I've come right back to 14 knots and I'm literally driving around the big ones, and not a problem. It's just going to take you longer and more fuel, of course, to get home. So when you're in sort of big seas like this, it's all about reading the waves, trying to get in between the flat bits and making sure you don't go up on a very high one and come down the front with the next wave ending up going over your nose. You can use the throttle to bring the nose up, so constantly work the throttle, and if you get to the top of a wave and you're going too fast, bring the throttle back like that, and then if you look as though you're going to go through a wave, throttle up to bring the nose up. And this takes a little bit of experience, but you'll get used to it after a while. And there we are, you see, back at the West Pole. We're going to get some really big seas here. I have been driving around the waves quite a bit, but all safe. And well, we'll be back in the marina in no time at all. Okay, we're back in Hayling Bay here. So basically it was use of throttle and driving around the waves to get through some pretty big seas there. There was about a metre swell and chop coming through there. The important thing is not to be a hero and start thrashing through it and try and go from wave top to wave top. Eventually you get it wrong and crash between the right in the trough. And it's fine, the hull will handle it, the engine will handle it, it's just everything inside the boat gets smashed. Your radio, all the trimmings and furnishings, and the seats start to collapse. And you have to bear that in mind, because once you've collapsed all the seats and everything, the boat can be a write-off. So yeah, no, that was just coming back in big seas, and I think I've probably only used about maybe 20 litres of fuel. I'm on the port tank now. I didn't want to, I could probably have gone there and back on the same tank, but I didn't want to risk actually running out in the tanker channel there, especially with that pilot vessel coming through. I'm just coming back into the marina now. My speedo was working all the way across there, and you may remember in my last video it stopped working. Now I think what made that fail was I was actually behind the